Do you have an independent mind? If so, I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just click on the subscribe button, ring that little bell, and stay up to date with my daily content. Thank you. So, posted at swerconish.com and in today's newsletter is a sensational offering from Garrett Graff at Politico. I'd never been involved in anything as secret as this. Garrett's a journalist, historian, author, most recently of the New York Times bestseller, The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11. And this at Politico is an oral history of the planning that went into the killing of Osama bin Laden 10 years ago this weekend. Garrett, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for chatting.
I am a sponge for all this detail. 10 years has not diminished one iota my desire to know everything about how it was planned and carried out. I will never forget where I was when President Obama made that announcement to the country. I had just come back with a good buddy of mine, Liberal Paul, from a Neil Young concert at the historic Tower Theater of Philadelphia, literally in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. And as Neil Young left the stage and people were now once again re-engaging with it was probably a BlackBerry at the time, there's like a big buzz and something was going on, but we really didn't know what it was. And then, of course, later that night, I guess it was close to midnight, when he finally spoke to the nation and he said this.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
So that was a Sunday night. Correct me if I'm wrong. He had greenlit the operation after months of planning that Friday.
Correct. This compound in Abbottabad that we're all familiar with now had been identified the previous summer 2010, and had been the subject for 8 months of one of the most secret and best kept military operational planning that the U.S. has seen in modern American history. And that Thursday, the previous Thursday, the president had met in the Situation Room with the nation's top national security and intelligence leaders, gone around the table one by one, asked them go, no go, and then Friday had decided to go ahead with the operation. And then, of course, what is so incredible looking back on that week now is that it was not even it was not the only super consequential political story playing out that week, because Friday he greenlights the operation, and then Saturday is the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where he just eviscerates and roasts Donald Trump. And then Sunday morning wakes up and the U.S. Navy SEALs go to Abbottabad and get bin Laden.
And Garrett, the mission, correct me again if I'm wrong, was to have taken place the very night of the White House Correspondent Association dinner, and was called off, postponed for weather.
Correct. The operational window due to the lunar cycle was basically Friday through Monday. And so Saturday was the first time that they tried, and the weather wasn't cooperating, and so they rescheduled immediately for Sunday.
So President Barack Obama, speaking to 1,000 people in that cavernous ballroom, stands up. I've got the audio. I have to play it. And with Donald Trump in the house, and knowing that this military operation is now a go, here's what he says.
Donald Trump is here tonight. Now, I know that he's taken some flack lately, but no one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac? Say what you will about Mr. Trump. He certainly would bring some change to the White House.
You know, it's amazing, and you uncover this in this oral history that is based on 30 key intelligence and national security leader interviews that you did, is that President Obama didn't let on in the slightest, but in retrospect, you can look at one of the jokes that was written for him where he was supposed to make a bin Laden reference and he wanted to change it, right, to Hosni?
Exactly. So, you know, the plot of that week, the political story, was the birth certificate, and the comments about Barack Hussein Obama. And so he had this whole riff of naming the pretend middle names of other Republican presidential contenders, possible presidential contenders for 2020. And so he had suggested one of the jokes originally written by his staff had been Tim Bin Laden Pawlenty. And that Saturday in the Oval Office, going over the speech, President Obama, with, you know, his speechwriters know nothing, you know, the political staff of the White House know nothing about this operation for that weekend. And he goes, you know what? We should just change it to be Hosni. I think Hosni is much funnier. Tim Hosni Pawlenty, as in Hosni Mubarak, the Egyptian dictator. And his staff is like, I don't actually think that that's funnier. I think people will get Bin Laden. And he's like, no, trust me. Hosni is much funnier.
You interview Jeremy Bash, you interview Mike Morrell, you interview Leon Panetta, and I'm focused now on they've discovered this odd compound in Abbottabad, the Pakistani equivalent of West Point, just to put this in some context. And one of the oddities is that, and Leon Panetta notes this, that there's a third floor outdoor area, but it is walled. And they wonder who would have a balcony built, but not be able to look out at the mountain range.
Exactly. And that, so Panetta is sitting, Leon Panetta, the CIA director, is sitting in that first briefing in August 2010 as the CIA, the NSA, and the NGA, the three intelligence agencies chasing this for the U.S., have identified this, what they call compound of interest in Abbottabad. And most Americans don't know anything about Abbottabad, had never heard of it before that night. But it's actually, a mountain resort community in some respects for Pakistan. And so he, exactly as you say, they look at this compound, they notice that there are 7-foot walls around the balcony on the third floor. And everyone says, well, why on earth would you build a balcony and then surround it with walls that you can't see out of?
The intelligence community has a model built. And again, as you reveal, the model makers don't know what they're making a model of and don't figure it out until the following day when the Abbottabad complex is on the front page of newspapers all across the country.
Yeah, I mean, the level of secrecy, the cloak of secrecy that enveloped this operation start to finish is unlike anything that the U.S. government has seen in modern times. And I was just struck time and again as I was reporting this piece about those little details where you see just how tightly held this was. I mean, the people who made the model of the compound for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency had no idea what they were building. At the NSA, this operation was so tightly held, so important, that the NSA agency-wide stopped all software upgrades for 3 weeks leading up to the operation to avoid the risk of disrupting any of its intelligence collection. But even on that morning, in that Sunday morning as the raids took place, less than 50 people inside the NSA knew that the operation was going on. And so they had teams all around the world supporting that operation doing what they call threat overwatch, monitoring the intelligence, monitoring the Pakistani military to try to make sure that these helicopters were able to get in and out safely. And those teams had no idea what they were actually supporting. And so I have in the story, the account of John Darby, the NSA's chief counterterrorism official, going up after the raid and telling the teams that had been working on this, let me tell you what that operation was that you were just supporting.
You speak with Admiral William McRaven, and he says, we looked at the model, and Morrell says, if you guys had to do this, how would you do it? Three options, it seems like, were mostly considered. A B-52 that could have just leveled the compound, a specified drone strike, or a raid. And of course, in the end, it was the raid. Why?
So this was actually a really interesting internal debate. Is on the one hand, the bombing option would not put any American lives at risk. But the flip side is they wouldn't necessarily ever be able to confirm that bin Laden was in the compound and that it was actually bin Laden. And so they decided that for the purposes of sort of permanently settling the debate, it was important to put U.S. lives on the line in order to go in and get bin Laden. And talking to McRaven about that raid, it was so fascinating because he was like, look, this is actually a relatively straightforward operation for U.S. Navy SEALs. They ran this exact same type of operation 8, 10, 12 times a night in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Sort of this, what they called find, fix, and exploit cycle of nighttime raids on compounds. So when Mike Morrell, the deputy director of the CIA, tells McRaven about this compound, they look at that model on the table. McRaven says, yeah, this is a compound. We're the best in the world at taking down compounds. This is pretty straightforward. And that from his mind, the mission was get the guy who lived on the third floor. And it didn't matter to him whether it was actually bin Laden or not, because he knew he could get the guys to the compound, they could breach the walls and make it to the third floor.
Was it a capture or was it a kill mission?
So again, one of the really interesting questions of this was, under the rules of war, could the U.S. government authorize a kill mission to target bin Laden? And effectively, the answer was yes, that this was a designated combatant. The president was within his constitutional authorities. But at the same time, if bin Laden surrendered, they actually had to legally accept the surrender. And so there was a lot of debate and a lot of discussion about how that raid could unfold and the decisions that the SEALs would have to make on the fly about whether this was a caption or a kill.
Garrett, you take us in the Situation Room when President Obama is going around the table and asking for the final advice of those that he trusts who are at the highest level of government. And of course, this discussion takes on added significance now because it's often been said that the then vice president was not in favor of moving forward. How would you characterize, based on your investigation, what exactly Joe Biden said that day?
Yeah, and part of what is so fascinating about this moment, I mean, that both that Situation Room debate and then the photo that we famously see from Pete Souza of all of them watching the raid unfold, is realizing sort of who the bit characters are in that picture. You know, you have future president of the United States, Joe Biden, future presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. You have the current Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, sort of stuffed into a back corner of the picture. And the current Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Dennis McDonough, sitting at the table as a junior, not junior, but a mid-level staffer at that point. And Joe Biden, in that Situation Room meeting on Thursday, says to the president that he doesn't think the raid should go forward, that he thinks the risk of damage to the U.S. relationship with Pakistan is too great. And Biden says afterwards, basically, that he saw his role as trying to carve out the maximum amount of decision space for the president. That he, everyone else in the room, except for Secretary Gates, was on the go side of the equation. And he wanted to make sure that the president felt he had the decision room and backing to decide against the raid if he wanted to. And that there's sort of a thread of this that the vice president was simply trying to zag while everyone else was saying zig.
If you go back and you scrutinize that picture, and I have, one of the other things that you notice, and you talked about this, is that President Obama is not at the head of the table. He's on a hard chair that he just pulled up along the side because he doesn't want to displace anyone whose job it was then to carry out that mission.
Exactly. So if you remember, there's an Air Force General, Marshal Brad Webb from the Joint Special Operations Command, sitting at the head of the table. This is actually, it's not the main Situation Room. It's one of the small conference rooms adjacent to the main Situation Room. And Brad Webb had set up there so that he was sort of out of the way and out of the traffic, but he had the video feed. And in the same way that we have all lived through presentations in our lifetime, AV operations, they couldn't figure out how to get the video feed from that small conference room onto the screen of the big conference room in the Situation Room. And so they ended up sort of people just trickled into that small conference room. And President Obama ends up sitting, off to the side in a corner in a hardback chair.
Pete Souza, the photographer for President Obama, who you just referenced a moment ago, when you interviewed him, this is among the many nuggets that you reveal that I loved. He said this, quote, "One thing about the photo you don't see is that both Biden and Mullen had rosary beads wrapped around their fingers."
Yes, and Leon Panetta, CIA director, had his rosary with him in the CIA headquarters where he was watching. And in fact, all three of them, Joe Biden, Admiral Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and CIA director Leon Panetta, had a photo taken of the three of them with their rosaries together after the president's speech that night.
Leon Panetta tells you that as the raid is now going down, there was about 15 minutes of silence, probably the longest 15 minutes of my life.
So this is after they see the initial gunfire from the compound, and then everyone heads into the SEALs head into the building itself, and there's about 15 minutes while they wait for word back. And then McRaven, who is on the ground in Afghanistan coordinating the mission, gets the radio call from the ground force commander, "For God and country, Geronimo, Geronimo, Geronimo," which is the code name for bin Laden, although most of the people watching in the Situation Room didn't know that at the time. McRaven quickly relays that to the White House, Geronimo, and then he realizes he didn't actually ask whether bin Laden was alive or dead. And so he goes back to the ground force commander and says, "Geronimo EKIA, enemy killed in action." And the report comes back, "Geronimo EKIA." And he turns around and tells the White House, "Geronimo EKIA." And that's when everyone watching at the White House knows for the first time.